Yo guys, it's Myden, and in this video I want to talk about the nicest semi-speed pad that I've used. This is of course the X-Raypad Thor, and it is very smooth. If you do want to get this design yourself, you can put in the notes when you buy a custom X-Raypad Thor, use the R2 pair design. You won't get this as exact pad. This pad does have black stitching, which I did ask for slight modifications for. The normal one is white. If you do want to get this design with the black stitching, you can just ask for black stitching, but I think the white stitching looks a little bit too bright. That's why I did get the black one. This surface to start out is very smooth. It is smoother than a Kurosan Ninja, which is already a very smooth pad. I put this close to the level of a Sheeting Kai, just being absolutely fluid with no texture at all on the surface. This pad is still slightly slower. I would say it's on the speed side. This pad does have a little bit more static and dynamic friction than something like a Aydan or a LiDAR, which I will be comparing it to later in the video, so stick around for that. But the surface is very high quality. From what I talked to about Brusky, he says a pad like this with a surface like this would wear down pretty quickly over the first few weeks of use, but I really did not feel any type of wear down at all, and this pad did keep a lot of its initial friction and didn't slow down much at all. Coming over to the stitching in this pad, it is like every other X-ray pad, where the stitching is about surface level, maybe a little bit higher. When I do run my mouse over the side of the pad, which I sometimes do if I'm making very wide flicks or very wide tracking motions, I do sometimes feel a little bit of grinding and the mouse does kind of go over the edge a little bit, so that is something to pay attention about. But since I mainly play COD now and I play in 15 centimeters, this pad is basically perfect and I never really get to the side of the pads at all. Of course, the base is like every other X-ray pad where it is rubber. It's one of those standard rubber bases that sticks pretty nice to your desk. I say it doesn't really move around that much unless you put a lot of force. Like I can do the one finger method, it still moves around. But in normal use, when I'm moving the mouse around fast, even with my sleeve, the pad doesn't move at all, so the rubber base isn't anything to be worried about at all. When it comes to this design, the design is very detailed. Of course, since they are the top leading brand in making custom pads, they have perfected what the design looks like and how they print well. There isn't any noticeable printing issues like there was on my custom Aqua Control Plus at the stitching. There is no bleed over like there was on that pad. And I do think this design looks very good on this pad with a lot of popping color, and this isn't bland at all. The Thor is a 3mm base pad that is mostly firm. It's not as firm as something like the Aydan, which I will compare it to later, but it is pretty firm. When I do press my mouse down into the pad, there isn't much push into it, and my mouse doesn't slow down that much. I don't feel any texture of the skates on top of the mouse pad at all. It's one of the smoothest glide experiences I've ever felt on any cloth pad. Now, to compare to other pads. The first pad I'm going to compare the Thor to is the Artisan Aydan Mid. The Aydan is of course much faster than the Thor is, both in dynamic and static friction. While the Aydan is very smooth, it does have more of a surface texture than the Thor does. The Thor is very smooth, like I said in the beginning, and it is noticeable when you're playing. The mouse does not have any feedback at all on the skates. While on this pad, I do feel a very slight texture. If you do want something that's very smooth and you already have this pad and you don't mind getting something that's a little bit slower, the Thor is perfect for you. The thicknesses, of course, are both the same. They're both about 3mm, and they both have the same mushy feeling. Both these pads are mid, while the Thor has a little bit more of a squish to it, with the Aydan being very firm. The next pad I'm going to be comparing the Thor to is the Musashi X Strahfe Void. This pad does have more static friction than the Thor does, but it has less dynamic friction. As you can see, the mouse glides a little bit further, while on the Thor, it does come to a complete stop. If you do want a pad that does have a very high dynamic friction, I say this is the pad for you. Also, the surface on the Musashi pad is already pretty smooth, but just like the Aydan, it's not as smooth as the Thor is. The Thor is on a whole nother level of smoothness. So that is something to keep in mind if you do either have the Void or the Aydan. It is smoother than both of these pads. So this wraps up my thoughts on the X-Raypad Thor. I do like this pad a lot. I think it'll be in my rotation with my favorite pads. I do have 2 pads on the way, the Speed V2 from Infinity Mice and the Crucible from Padsmith, so I will be reviewing those on a later date. But until then, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.